Well, hello there. Isn't lockdown fun? I've got a few reads for you, which might or might not be fun and might or might not distract from lockdown. And we've a lot of books coming in, so I'll put them out here. Now, the first one, Elena Ferrante, that's her new one called Lying Life of Adults. I haven't read these, so haven't really had time. Alexander McCall Smith, How to Raise an Elephant, so another one in the Mama Ramaswati series. Haven't read it either. And a little thriller, big thriller, Benjamin Stevenson's Either Side of Midnight, which I've read a chapter of and went, ooh! So if you're looking for a very gripping thriller about a news anchor who commits suicide on screen, not a very glorious thing to do, but and who gets his estranged brother thinks he's actually been murdered. So it's a really quirky, weird one. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. So we'll see how we go with that. Now, but yeah, the first chapter was very gripping. Now we're going to start with, I have to keep one of these out because I've got one coming up later that I've got to look at. To start with, Women's Pages by Victoria Parham, and I know some of you already spotted this, well done. I read a few of Parham's, enjoyed enormously the Bonegilla Girls, and really admire her sense of getting a sense of the vernacular of the time she's writing about. Great eye for detail, immensely readable, lovely Australian narratives. Now, Amy read us this one. I didn't actually read it, so I'll read out what she says. So she says, I really enjoyed this one. Perfect escapism into post-World War II Australia. Written through the perspective of a young female journalist who's awaiting for her husband, who's been a prisoner of war. Amy says her inner speech is insightful, highly emotive, and acts as a wonderful tribute to women during the war, and has a very strong female voice, filled with optimism. So we could do with a bit of that, couldn't we? But it encourages moments of vulnerability, which creates a bond between you as the reader and the characters in the book. And she finishes by saying her protagonist successfully embodies lots of aspects of feminism that, you know, exist as much today as then, and was an absolute joy to read. So that's one to keep in mind, Victoria Parham. Always a great read. You'll know well, you don't know what you're getting until you read it, do you? But you know what I mean. You know you're onto a good thing with her. Over to the States now with Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. This is an absolute stunner. It's a stunner, but yeah, another one of these racial stories where you've got a girl who's a Cherokee, part Cherokee, part white, and she's born into one of these very huge, sprawling families with 8 siblings, I think, and her Betty, it is based on a true story. Betty herself resembles her father, who's the Cherokee side, very much, and the whole story is written in very lyrical, very image-filled prose. Her father tells her lots and lots of stories, and a lot of these stories counter the really very heart-wrenching, sad, and kind of heads-up content. What I mean by that is there are quite a lot of incidents of abuse, of racial, even within the family, unfairnesses. It's very strong on how women are treated. Her own mother in the story is very fragile and very otherworldly, but that lovely tethering all the time to Cherokee mythology and legend. And the vote of the year for the father figure in this goes to Landon. He must be the absolute best dad in history. So despite the fact that they're very, not ugly, but possibly distressing parts of, there's a lot of beauty in this book. It is an absolute cracker. Say it's going to be shortlisted for a couple of things, so keep an eye on that one. You'll need your tissues. Just saying, as they say. But definitely worth it if you're feeling, you know, that you could get into something a bit different. This one, I was really surprised by my own reaction to this book, because I read on the back the Germans in World War II, in Russia, when it's freezing cold, and I went, oh God, that sounds like a man's book. I'm being totally honest, that's what I said. And I said, but God, look at that cover. Maybe it'll be a bit romantic, because it gives you both, doesn't it? Anyway, off I popped and said, well, I'm going to read it because I'd heard great things about his first book. Golly, he writes a cracker of a novel. If you can get me to sort of wander around with my writer a German medical field unit filled with men, in freezing conditions, where it's about giving orders, receiving orders, chopping off limbs, saving lives, male banter, and keep me hooked in. This is an absolute testament to stunning writing, and it is stunning writing. It's a stunning novel. It's set in Tolstoy's estate in Russia called, I can't pronounce Russian, I've never learned it, but Yashava Polyana. And there is an intendant or a sort of housekeeper for Leo Tolstoy's estate. He's actually buried in this place. And there's all sorts of shenanigans. She's an absolutely wonderfully strong, resistant, rebellious, yet in an odd way respectful character who bonds very well with our protagonist Paul Bauer, who's a surgeon. There is a love story. There's a little bit of hopping around in time, but it's glorious. It's a stunningly good read. Highly recommend that. The dialogue is to die for. He really does so much incredibly clever work with dialogue. Yeah, go for that one. The Motherful by Kate Mildenhall. Now, I read this about a month ago, or it might even be a bit more, and it's not all entirely fresh, and as you all know, or as you're finding out now, there are so many wonderful books coming in, and this is one of them. Very different from what we've seen here. This is a, shall we say, an Australia which we might come to, where we're under a little bit, or quite a lot of surveillance. There is that department in this story who physically tracks you with trackers, implants in your body. We have a young mum, Mim, and she's 2 children who through the narrative grow through puberty. And they are, like all children, her source of worry, concern. She mothers them in a highly overprotective manner, which is a deliberate sort of way of telling how we are as mothers, and how we have to learn to let our children grow into who they're going to be. But circumstances make those children into who they can really be. It's an absolutely stunning read. Mim's husband works as a geologist over in China in a mining company, and all is not what it seems. He goes off grid. She's then tracked down by the department. She then goes on the run for various reasons, which I'm not going to tell you, and hooks up with someone who can get her on a boat and with her children to go and find her husband. And that keeping 3-4 people confined on a boat is a superb way of getting up close with them and seeing what can go wrong, how people rub off each other, and how she eventually watches who her children can be and what they can become. It's a stunner, very different from her first book, and I absolutely recommend it. It's a little bit dystopian, but it's an Australia that we can all kind of recognise. A lovely, lovely, and very thought-provoking exploration of what the future could be. So, without giving you the heebie-jeebies, which we all have anyway. Go figure. Next one, Andrew O'Hagan, Mayflies. Now, David read this a while ago, and he did that thing I keep telling you about. He's superbly annoying. When he says, oh my God, this is so good, you've got to read it. And I go, could I have a double life, please? I would love to have a double life. So I've given it a bit of a go. I haven't finished it, so I'm not going to lie to you. But it's a cracker. There seemed to be this series of books coming out that are talking about friendships. Now, this is an absolutely glorious tribute to male friendship. I have books coming up about female friendship. This one is an absolute tribute to male friendships, how they endure, how you emerge through the friendship. And in this book, of course, it's not just about male friendships. In the second half of the book, O'Hagan does talk about who the partners are and how you develop by living with people. By people, we all live with people. What I mean is by being close up. It starts in 1986, Scotland, and we have these 2 young fellows who are very working class. You've got Jimmy who's kind of thoughtful. He observes, so that's kind of a nice thread, the way he looks at people and his kind of empathy towards them. And then you have this Tully Dawson, who's hugely charismatic, larger than life, and people gravitate towards him. And he's kind of that natural born, shining golden boy and a natural leader. These lads won, the first part of the book is really their magical trip to Manchester, which is the centre of the universe in the 80s for them, because they're just absorbed and obsessed with music and the rock scene and the stars. These are the idols they had, and everything was meaningful. And it's how at 18 they think they know nothing and they think they know everything. It's and how they set themselves up against their fathers, particularly. Jimmy doesn't do so well with his parenting. He actually kind of divorces them because they seem to leave him in the lurch a bit. Then they meet up again in 2017 and at a wedding, and Tully has a request to make of his friend, which will not test their friendship, but show the depth of that friendship. Stunner. You would do very well to read that. Lots of wit. It has a theme in it which is to do with bleaker things, but it's very much written with wit, pathos, a bit of darkness. It's wonderful. I love a bit of dark myself. Now, this is another one, Australian. Meg Mason's written Sorrow and Bliss, and there's been quite a lot of noise about this book, so I said, all right, a story about marriage, that's an enduring theme, and I have a few books in on that one. Why this one? Well, why this one? Good question. Because she makes you laugh. It's not really just about marriage, but she makes you laugh and cry. And yeah, it's another tissues book. And I've already given an award to the best dad in Betty. I'm giving an award to the best sister ever written in Ingrid in this one. And I know I'm not alone in that one. Martha is married to Patrick, and they're relatively young. She'd had a previous marriage which didn't work out at all, and she's just convinced there's something wrong with her. And Patrick just says everybody's fucked up. Excuse me, am I allowed to say that? We're all in a mess, and it's all relative, so don't worry about it. But she eventually has these brushes with kind of that verge of where you're actually all right and you're actually not. And she makes you laugh a lot, Mason, when she talks about that. But there's this feeling of precarity that it is more serious than Patrick sort of. He's not really trying to talk her out of being thinking she's bonkers. He just loves her, and he's not being obstinate. He just is, and that's a very gorgeous relationship. She has the most amazing friends. There are beautiful descriptions of people who know she's thinking about how dark and bleak things are, and who make her laugh or tell her to go be bleak in Paris. It's superb, a great laugh. It gets all the votes. Loved it, but I had a box of tissues ready, and I did that sort of thing where it's like the spring rain. You're having a shower, or is this only Ireland? No, I think Melbourne's the same. You're having a shower, but at the same time there's the sunlight. So gorgeous. Not very much sunlight exactly in this one. Sarah Moss's Summer Water. Now this is very like John McGregor's Reservoir 13, if any of you read that. Kind of a slow-moving narrative which keeps you always with this sense of where are we going? What's going to happen? We have a very dank and dismal, sounds great, doesn't it? Lakeside resort with these different cabins, and they're different in occupants, and some of them are there more full-time than others, but they're mostly holiday and pretty dreary basically. And in one cabin you've got a runner who, before I tell you about the individuals, and I won't tell too much because that might give you a bit too much of a spoiler, but I suppose it's really about how you can get driven to, you can come so close to a crisis point, and it can be an unobserved one except by yourself. So this is a lot about the observing yourself. So it's a lot of internalized stuff. All the different people that we meet, and there aren't that many, they're small groups, come very, very close to either pushing themselves too hard or pushing someone else too hard, or losing control over something, and not having control over things, or aging or forgetting. There's cruelty, there's ostracizing people. It is a little bit about who's excluded and who's included. So there's a kind of I suppose I could say a moral level. And then we have parts of the natural world, so which is something she does extremely well. She describes the inevitability of how as humans we're really just part of a natural world. And for that alone and how well she does it, it's worth reading. You're not going to be having an absolute blast. She's not going for humour. She's making you think, and she's asking you to see how other people think and how close sometimes we might all be to getting to a crisis. Now, the Midnight Library, that was one that I'm not going to cheat. I always say that to you, and then I probably do cheat. Yeah. Matt Haig. Now, a lot of us may have read him. I think he's a tremendous realm of fantasy, but it's not pure. Well, this one is actually pure fantasy. He wrote The Humans, which I thought was one of the funniest books ever, about aliens. This is about that borderland between life and death. And again, there seems to be a theme, and I'm wondering now that I'm talking whether this theme isn't very deathy. But this one is hilarious in that then our story, Nora, is a young woman in her 30s, and she's not sure that she can put up with things very much. Life hasn't gone the way she's wanted to. She regrets a lot of her choices, and her cat has died. That does not work. And she wakes up, she thinks about ending it all, and it wakes up in the library. It's called the Midnight Library, which is where you go, where you can try again. So it's Haig letting us play with that idea of if I'd made this decision, or if I'd taken that job, or if I'd really tried harder. And she's allowed to become all those other people that she might have been, which is a fabulous thing, because it gives you a lot of the joy of that in the long run, some of the same things are going to happen to you no matter which path you choose. There are the same inevitable things. It's beautifully written, a lot of magic and realism, and you do fall very much in love with his writing, his characters, his idea. It's a nice one. Make you feel good. Last one up, I raved like. I never shut up about the first one. Well, it's not Nunez's first one. The Friend, the one about the dog. She's done it again. What are you going through? And to be totally honest, with the days that are upon us, that's a very good question. And I think it's one that Nunez is addressing as she's written this. We have a narrator, and I think this is probably the most intriguing thing about the way she writes is that you often say this isn't fiction, she's writing about herself, but it's fiction. And this story, if you want me just to bring it to a plot, there is a friend of hers who has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she would like Nunez, you see I've said it and I'm conflating my author, she would like the main character to help her die with dignity. And far from being a really difficult read, it's about the whole book is about empathy. It's about how we all have our stories, and how in the long run the character talks to people, and they tell her little stories, and they tell her about their sadnesses and their happiness. Even the cat talks to her and tells her things. And particularly with this friend, it's about missed encounters. She meets up with an ex, and he's talking about how the whole world is going to end, and he's kind of dispassionate. And it's all how stories are within stories, but that all we really have to do is listen. And in order to listen, or in order to ever get to that place of listening, you have to be able to ask that question, what are you going through? And that we should be asking it to everyone. It's beautiful, it's lyrical, it's very poetic. And you read it with it's full of quiet grace. And I think that's a lovely thing to offer us at this time of the year. At this time of the year, at this dreadful time of our history. That's me pile. I hope you find something in there that cheers you up, makes you think, gives you a good time. I'm quite proud of myself really for having got through some of those. You'll definitely find something, I hope you do. In the meantime, Well, you know what to do. Ring us up if you want something to read. We'll get it to you. Thank you for everyone who's buying from us. Thank you for watching this. Keep reading, and all my love. See you soon.